Welcome to Leading Questions. I'm Julia Sydorenko.
I'm Kayla Theeuwen.
And I'm Megan Mah, and we're lawyers at WeirFoulds. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, welcome. Leading Questions is a web series where we answer some of your burning questions about law, business development, and professional development.
Today we have a special edition for all you students getting ready for law firm recruitment. No law, business, or professional development in today's episode, just the straight goods on how you should be preparing for your upcoming interviews.
We're joined today by 3 of our 2020 articling students.
Hey everyone, I'm Nevethan Balendra.
I'm Janice Philteos.
And I'm Kriszenfeld.
And they're here to share their experiences. Let's get to it.
So first question is for Nevethan. OCIs, speed dating for law students. So tell us, what are the top 2 things that you did to prepare for them?
The 2 main things are research and connections. I didn't want my application to be super cookie cutter, and I still wanted to get a good job. So I wanted to find a way to make myself stand out. I wanted to show the firms that I was genuinely interested in applying there. So I did as much research as I could. I would visit the websites. I learned more about the types of work that they did, the certain practice groups, and I would look at some of the profiles of lawyers and see how they got to where they were. LinkedIn and Google were my best friends here.
So what if you read about a lawyer or a firm that seemed really interesting to you?
I would reach out. I didn't hesitate. I reached out to students, associates, partners, whoever I thought would be a great person to talk to. I just sent out an email and hope for the best. And many were really gracious to give me a telephone call or just have an online conversation. And I was able to talk about their experiences and their journey. And doing this type of research helped me craft my resume and cover letter appropriately. I was able to get feedback. I was able to implement that feedback and eventually refine my application product as a whole. And it really did make a difference. And before my interviews, I would go through my resume very thoroughly, make sure that I could speak about every single point that I had written down. And I tried to incorporate as many anecdotes as I could. For example, I was on the varsity fencing team, and I wanted to highlight some of the challenges I faced when I was on the team, whether it was during my undergraduate, my graduate studies, or even in my first year of law school. And I love sports. I thought it's a great way to relate to, for other people to relate to for fencing as well. So speaking about sports or speaking about honestly anything I'm passionate about is a great way to establish that connection.
So speaking of bullet points and resumes, I've seen a lot of student resumes, and one small thing that really makes a difference is formatting. So make sure that you're consistent with formatting, fonts, bullet points, and those sorts of things. And when your resume is really in a pile of 100 or even 1,000, small things like this can really help make the difference and tip the scale in your favor. And as we all know, lawyers love attention to detail. Okay, Nevethan, what is one helpful strategy for preparing for your interviews?
So what I would do is, in addition to annotating my resume and just having my cover letter known inside out, I would make sure that I had answers to a simple question, which is just, what are the 3 things that stand out? And for these 3 answers, I would have a 1-minute answer, a 3-minute answer, and a 5-minute response. So to summarize, if I was talking about fencing again, I would be able to talk about fencing and be prepared to talk about fencing for 5 minutes if need be. But usually when you have these conversations, they're fluid conversations where you have a back and forth, then you don't get the full 5 minutes to talk about what you want to talk about. So that's where you have that 1-minute or 3-minute response in the back of your head, so that if you ever fall back, you can go back to the key points that you want to emphasize. And that way I was always on top. And if I ever stuttered or if I ever blanked for any reason, I knew exactly how to get back on point.
That's awesome. So it sounds like preparation really is key. You can't ever know your resume too well. Next question is for Janice. How did you best prepare for your interviews?
Something I did that I felt helped a lot with my preparation was making cheat sheets for my interviewers and for the firm. And I would actually attach pictures of my interviewers onto the cheat sheet. I know that sounds really creepy, but it helped make me feel like I was acquainted with these people and that there was less of a sense of unknown entering the interview. And I would also have bullet points about the firm in general, like the type of practice group they engaged in, and if they did any type of work I was passionate about, like pro bono work.
That's a great idea. And full disclosure, I also made cheat sheets with people's photos on them. So, you know, if that's creepy, then I was also creepy. So did you prepare for specific questions when you were getting ready for your interviews?
I tried not seeming scripted, so I didn't want to prepare too much, and I wouldn't write down a paragraph for questions, but I tried to prepare some sort of bullet points that I could turn to and made sure I hit certain factors that I wanted to mention. And if there was a story I could pull into certain questions, I would try to make my responses more memorable.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. I think, you know, you always want to give the interviewer something to remember you by. So what about questions that you asked interviewers? Do you have any suggestions for that as you're preparing them?
In my opinion, the scariest part about an interview is that quiet silence. So I had prepared a cheat sheet of different questions I would ask students, associates, and partners in case I ever got quiet, just to re-spark that conversation. But research is key here. You don't want to ask someone how it was like articling at the firm if they did an article there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And another thing that I find sort of as I was going through the process as a student, and then even afterwards as I've been on the other side of the interviewing table, is you want to be asked, or if you're the student, you want to ask a meaningful question. Don't ask your interviewer something that you can find the answer to very easily on a website. Like mentoring program, we most likely have it. And if you don't know whether we have it, go check the website. This is really an opportunity for you to let the interviewer know that you've thought about an insightful question that will help you make a decision moving forward. So what about networking? Any sort of final words about how to network or the importance of networking?
I cannot stress how important networking is. As a law student, the idea of associates and partners, it's terrifying. But speaking to a vast variety of them just helped humanize them. And when I was interviewing, it just felt like another conversation with someone else that worked at a cool firm instead of a really scary interview.
Awesome. Thanks for those answers, Janice. Last but not least, Dana, were you surprised by the types of questions you were asked?
Yeah, I thought it was super surprising. A lot of the questions were a lot more conversational than I had anticipated. I would say that very little, if anything, none of them were actually legal or law related questions. And I found it that the interviewers had fixated on things, tiny little details on my resume that I didn't expect, which is why I think to my friend's points that it's so important to know your resume like the back of your hand, because you never know the types of questions that you're going to be asked. And I did find for sure that different firms ask different kind of questions. Some are conversational, others can be more on the behavioral side. So definitely be prepared for both.
Yeah, I think that's especially true at the OCI stage. For the most part, I think interviewers are just looking for someone who can hold down their own in a conversation. So we heard from Janice about her strategies for interview prep. What was one of yours?
So what I did was enlist in the help of my family and friends. I had them ask me questions based on my resume and cover letter, just off the top of the hat, in the days leading up to my interviews. I wanted them to catch me off guard. I wanted to be confused, and that way for the actual interviews, I was prepared for anything. So all of us interviewed pre-Zoom and before Zoom was even a household name. But if I had to do a Zoom interview today, I would think that I would do practice runs again, enlisting in the help of my family and friends to make sure that I was comfortable with my home environment, with my surroundings, and just the general setting of Zoom. I think it's super important to have someone that you trust beforehand to test out the waters and see if there's anything that you need to fix up before your actual interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Even now, I need some practice opening up all the different applications, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx. What's next? Final question. What did you do after your interviews?
So I always recommend this to everyone. What I did was draft thank you emails beforehand. So the days of your actual interviews can be pretty exhausting. And by the end of the day, your brain is completely mush. So your mind won't be as sharp as at the beginning and the end of the day. So that anything that you can do in advance is always a good idea in my eyes. So once I interviewed for every single firm, I would jot down just a little note about what I spoke with that interviewer, just so that at the end of the day, when I was drafting these emails, I could add a little personal touch so that it sets me apart rather than just a generic email to each firm and to each person. So that way they also remembered who I was. And with that, the caveat to sending these thank you emails, don't be afraid if you don't get a response from these lawyers. Some interviewers will respond, some won't. It doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Us lawyers are very busy people, and some of them simply just don't have the time to respond, or it might get lost in their inbox. At least that's what some of the interviewers had told me after I got my job.
Thanks so much, Nevethan, Janice, and Dana. This was incredibly helpful. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions or topics that you'd like us to address in future episodes, please email us at leadingquestions@WeirFoulds.com. See you next time.